Good morning, guys, and welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
I didn't even get a chance to say Fernando. Today we have a Mazda MX5, also lovingly called the
Mazda?
Miata.
Oh. Okay.
Totally depressing. That's right, the small little two-seater full of fun and excitement. This particular one has the Bose radio in it, which means it has a center channel. It has these two rear speakers here, and in the door it has a big mid-bass and a smaller, higher frequency driver up top, kind of like a middler. This is a unique install though. This one is really gonna be different. Normally we would try to retain this 5-channel system that's in here, replacing it with like a new center channel, components up front, integrating into the Bose system. This, however, is not going to be that video. Today we have a very specific goal that this customer is trying to hit. This is a very special car to him. He had a very unique request for this. He wants a high-res audio system. He doesn't care about the Bose system. He doesn't care about the placement. He 100% says, I want high-res. I want everything to be high-res. I want basically a bookshelf style speaker, but in his car. That means we're going to be doing a new radio, the Kenwood Exelon DMX957XR high-res radio. We're going to be going with a set of XR1801P 7-inch XR high-res speakers. And to power it all, we'll be doing the XR 401.4 4-channel high-res audio amplifier. We'll be retaining the steering wheel controls and adding in a USB in the front so he can plug in to do his high-res player and all that. But that's the goal of this system. So all the Bose, all the bye-bye, this is what we're going to do today. Kenwood makes a full high-res system, as we just saw. Without further ado, you ready to get started?
Let's go.
Let's go. The first step in this system is kind of twofold. For one, we need to get the door panels off and see what kind of brackets we need to make to go from whatever the factory size speaker is to our new 7-inch. Two is get the audio side of things going, meaning get that radio out of the dash, which is not fun. Mazdas are never fun. They always hide bolts in the back, so you gotta do like pull the glove box, pull the knee buster, pull all that fun stuff. And then also locate the amplifier, which according to my research should be located somewhere here behind the passenger seat. Fernando's gonna start on the door panel. I'm gonna start removing this back part of the car and see if we can locate the amplifier.
To remove the door panel in this Mazda MX5 or Mazda Miata, grab a skinny screwdriver. I like the flat one. Pull the handle carefully, pry it out. Has some clips, be careful to not break it. Has a Phillips screw in the inside. Grab your pry tool, plastic, so you don't damage or scratch any of the door panel. And this part right here of the handle has another screw right behind it. Most of the people start from the right side and it's kind of hard. I like to start on the left side from the bottom. Put your hand because sometimes flies out. And see, another Phillips screw. Inside of the cup holder, it's another screw if you see on the left side. And we have 3 screws all together. You grab your pry tool and start. You can see we have a loose door panel. Shake it, pop it up. Now that you have the door panel all loose, have the door cable for the lock and the handle. They just pop out. We have the plug for the speaker, the windows for the mirrors, and the door lock. Sometimes if it doesn't come out, grab a flat screwdriver, push it down, and you remove it. Sometimes all the clips stay in the actual door. Grab your pry tool. For this one I use the metal one. Just be careful. I like to put the clips backhand in the door panel so we don't lose it.
Fernando has the door panel off. We can see here the Bose, it's like a 9-inch or 8-inch driver, inverted magnet. This is what is giving us our deep bass response out of this, which really isn't that deep. We'll be making brackets in order to fit our 7-inch into that. Where the tweeter was, or the mid-range, that's actually bolted to the door panel. What we have there looks like a 2.5-inch or 3-inch middler. We'll be replacing that with the tweeter. Let's take a look at the speakers we're going to be replacing these with. These are the Kenwood Reference Series speakers. Kenwood makes 3 lines of product. They make the regular Kenwood, they make the Kenwood Exelon, and then they make the Kenwood Reference, which is called XR. Inside the box we get owner's manual, instruction manual, warranty card. It comes with plates. This is kind of a cool feature. Depending on what vehicle you have, these are designed to fit in multiple applications. Toyotas, Dodges, Fords, Chevys, they all go in. If you have a standard 6x9 location, this will go in as well. The other thing that a lot of people ask about is, can I put these 7-inch where my 6.5 goes? If you notice, it has this 1/2-inch spacer here. If you remove this, all of these pieces, it is an adapter that goes from factory 6.5, these screw holes here, out to the 7-inch. As long as you have the depth, you can easily take this from a 6 to a 7-inch. Buried underneath them is the grill. Has the nice gold logo on it. It's mesh. First up is the tweeter. It's a big tweeter. It's a super tweeter, and this is the smallest that this tweeter gets. It doesn't come apart. You can't remove this out of it. It has this nice gold ring around it. This is made to go in a big location where we have that 2 or 3-inch driver. We'll be able to make a bracket and mount it right in there. As far as brackets that it does come with, this can here, it's designed to mount flat here, so you could put it on an A-pillar or on a corner of a dash or wherever you'd like to put it. It also comes with the back mounting brackets. On the rear side of the tweeter, it has a screw hole. If you have a hole, you'd put this through, and then this bracket will attach to the back of it and mount it into the panel. Comes with big passive crossovers. One of the really cool features about this crossover is that it is biampable. That means you have your inputs here, and it comes with this nice big pre-made jumper if you're going to be running just, let's say, a 2-channel amp to it. But if you have a 4-channel, you can put woofer input here, your tweeter input here, then you have the woofer output, and then you have 3 outputs for the tweeter. The first one is negative 0 dB and then a negative 3 dB option. For this installation, we're going to be going full active from the amplifier, which we'll talk about in a little bit. If we didn't have the particular amplifier we're using and we just had a standard 4-channel amplifier, we could use this in order to cross everything over. And lastly, we have the 7-inch. Taking a closer look at the driver, glass fiber cone, rubber surround, composite basket, inverted dust cap, decent sized magnet, power handling for the system is 120 watts. The ohm load on this is 3 ohms, so we'll be getting a little bit more power out of it. Also included in the box are some screws and some butyl rubber if you are going to be using the grill. Make sure to not lose this bag of screws. It has all the screws in it. The screws we're going to need to attach the 1 3/16 of an inch tweeter are located in this bag. They're very small. I'm going to just keep everything in this for right now. Let's grab the factory speakers and compare them to our new aftermarkets. As far as physicality goes, I don't know if this is a fair comparison. This is technically a subwoofer, and this is technically a mid-bass. When we compare the two in size, they're very similar. However, if you look closely at the back, you'll see that the surround does go all the way out to this here. This is definitely a bigger driver, but not by much. It's 7 inches across. This is 7 inches across to the basket, which means in reality we have 6 1/4 inches of cone. With this guy, we actually have 7 inches of cone. This is the magnet structure here. It's a neo magnet mounted to the front. As you can see, there's nothing here. This is a drip guard that's located on the back, so when the water comes down it brushes off of that, which is really nice. If you look at the speaker, really digging in and like staring at the speaker, you can see the age of this. The spider is basically warped. It has a U shape to it in this area right here. It has definitely seen better days. The surround is still intact, and they do put this really thick membrane across the front, which I get it. I mean, I understand why they do it, but I feel like this membrane probably absorbs some of the output volume. I don't know if it's a great idea, but it's Bose, so who's going to question them? Task now is to take this form factor and move it over into this form factor. For replicating this, we're over at our router station. We've cut 2 panels that are bigger than this shape here, and the idea is we can attach this to one of them, router out our shape. Unfortunately, it has this big thing that sticks out of the front here. I found the center of one of them. I'm going to take a hole saw and drill this in so that I can get this to sit flat. This is about 2 inches. With that removed, this will now sit flat on top of there. Screw it in place. We're using a Mobile Solutions quad stack 1/4 inch spiral cut bit. Get our height right, lock it back into place. Now we have an exact copy of our Bose speaker. We can set this aside. The next piece we need is the 6x9 to 7-inch adapter. And why we need this is we're going to use this internal circle here to put our hole inside of that. It does have these little nipples on the back that need to be grinded off. Line it up with our readjust the height. And that leaves us with this here. Marked up this one side with a bunch of grease. We'll use this side as the one we're going to be putting into the car. The next thing I want to do though is countersink my mid base into this. We've set up that bit over here. We've checked how deep our basket is and put that height on the bit. We've changed our ball bearing so that we'll have enough for the speaker to sit inside. Lock it in place. Our vacuum is open. There we have it. Test fit in our mid base. Ooh, fits like a glove. Nice and level like this. Screw holes here on the back. I can take a drill and just make those bigger. I need to make a second one of these really quick. And through the magic of routers, we have 2 identical brackets that I can now get over to Fernando, and he can get the speakers put into the car. This is the high frequency mid-range we'll be taking out. Also, we call them middlers. Comparing it to the tweeter, this is a pretty big tweeter. We need to make a bracket that this will mount into so that we can center these things up. And for that, we'll be using the laser. I need to scan these in to the computer and replicate them. To scan these in, we'll be using an Epson flatbed scanner. Place our speaker on top, scan the image in. That's what our speaker looks like. The next part of the process is opening our Amidine software. Drag in our picture scan. As you can see, it's way bigger than it needs to be. Scale this down. We have to find the right size. So like we could trace this out and draw it, but that doesn't mean it's gonna be to scale. Looking at this, we can get a good idea that the outside of this basket is in the scan. Using our calipers, we can see the maximum size of this speaker, which is about 3.37 inches. This is the scale it needs to be, and that gets us right where we want to be. Now we just have to trace this object inside of the software and recreate it. These shapes over here on the side are what's going to allow us to do that. Measure for our screw hole. And there we have our basic shape of the factory speaker drawn in. We just need to now add in our hole for the tweeter. Using the calipers, line it up with our XY. And there we have it. We have a Mazda tweeter mount. Here is our piece. Our tweeter snaps in. Dude, we almost, look at that. That's how tight that is. That's laser. Gotta love it. We're still gonna put our back piece on because it's gonna be mounted like this. We don't want it falling out. If you ever get anything with acrylic and it has paper like this on it and you're trying to figure out how to get the paper off, grab another piece of acrylic. Acrylic doesn't scratch acrylic. and it makes it super easy to get this off. Even if you're gonna scratch it. Most of the time you're gonna be getting two of something, so use one to clean the other one off. No scratches. Ooh. Now there is a left and right side because it has the two notches here and the one notch here. Test fit it on the door to make sure you get the right side up. Open our bag and grab our little screws. And there we have it. We have one tweeter done. I'm gonna get this over to Fernando so he can get it in the door.
In this particular car, I like to put one screw in the top just to hold the bracket. Not all the way. And then I can run my speaker wire through this notch. Speaker is mounted, zip tie, speaker is plugged in. For this tweeter, we're gonna install a little bit of foam. If you're wondering which one is positive and which one is negative, black with the gray is gonna be our negative.
Fernando just informed me he's done with the door. Let's take a closer look. The 7-inch is mounted in place with those cool brackets that we made. As you can see, it's a nice flush look. It goes on there. It looks really good. I love the carbon look of the cone. He's added in R connectors for the mid-range as well as the tweeter. The tweeter is also mounted in place with R connectors on them. This is what I was talking about. They have the areas here for that one end, and on the opposite end it just has a single notch. Make sure you get that correct. He added in some foam to push the tweeter sound into the door. Now he can get this back on and finish it up and head over to the passenger side.
And just like that, this door is done.
For dash kit in this, we'll be using the 997506 from Metra. It has a nice fit and finish to it. Inside the pocket, if you're gonna do a floating radio or a single din, it has the mounting brackets along with some clips to hold it in place. The single din ISO mount bracket as well, and their brackets to hold the radio in. Anytime you get a dash kit, I strongly recommend going through the owner's manual to figure it out. Metra does an exceptional job of walking you through the disassembly process of the dash. And this one is no different. There is a ton of stuff to take apart on this. We need to get the air conditioner out so we can install that into the kit. Let's hop into the vehicle and we'll get the radio out. According to the instructions, the first step is removing this area underneath the steering wheel, the knee buster. It doesn't have any screws, it just unclips from the top and then slides forward. We have a piece of metal underneath here that has 4 Phillips screws. This is the piece here. It has one little leg on the back that attaches it into the dash. Step 4 on this is the real kicker for sure. Looking at the side of the dash, the radio climate control panel, from the underneath the steering column opening, remove one 10mm bolt from the side of the radio chassis. Basically in this area here, but located up in the dash and over, is a 10mm bolt.
I see the bracket, but there's no screw in there.
We might be lucky. Somebody might have already had the radio out and removed the screw. We'll move on to the next step, is removing these 2 side pieces here next to the radio. Start at the bottom and pull it forward. It has a couple clips on it. On the sides of the radio here are a couple screws. We should be able to put our fingers here on the sides, give it a slight pull, and the radio would come right out. If that bolt was in there, what would happen is you'd sit here and you'd be pulling and nothing would happen. Naturally, the radio isn't going to come out that far, so it is going to be a pain in the butt to get in here and unplug this thing. Join me back at the bench and we'll take this apart and get it mounted into our dash kit. The first step we need to do on the dash kit is get rid of this center brace here. For that, we'll use some cutters. We just need to rough cut it first just to get it out. You can see it leaves a little leg. Grind it down. There's a little tooth on the back here that needs to stay, so it needs to have like a T shape to it. This is that little tooth there. This needs to stay because it is going to line up our mounting brackets. These have a left and a right, and they have that same L shape, and they snap in like that. Grabbing the Kenwood radio, slide this over into place, slowly pushing it down. The metric kit doesn't give you any screws because there's two different styles of screws that we use. We use a machine thread or a coarse thread. On the factory radio itself, it will have machine threads. Kenwood uses machine threads, and there is a bag in the box when you buy the radio. Line the radio up and add in your screws. You may have to loosen it up and adjust it. Comes with 6 screws, 2 on top, 1 on the bottom. If you want all 4, steal 2 off of your factory radio. Check the alignment around your corners and your gapping. If it's good, make sure the screws are nice and tight. Flipping the radio over, there's 4 Phillips screws we need to remove to get the air conditioning off. Once removed, set the radio aside, you're done with it. With 2 screws in, and I do strongly recommend using a regular screwdriver, don't use a drill. Flip it over, make sure that it lined up right. It is. We'll add in our last 2 screws. For the most part, this is done. However, it's not done for me. Manufacturers now are using a lot of these little flags to denote what a common colored RCA does. In this case, these are for the cameras. I like to take a Sharpie and write what they are on the RCAs. The reason for that is it might be a year or 2 or 3 down the road, and they might pull this radio out, decide they want to add a backup camera or a side camera or something like that, and these little flags may have fallen off. I also like to zip tie these up into a bundle. That way I don't have 4 skinny 18 gauge wires flopping around in the dash that could possibly get cut or snagged or ripped off the radio if someone goes to remove it and they get caught in something. Kind of a strength in numbers type thing. I don't like zip tying the USBs all the way down, but I do add one here closest to the radio, about 1 inch away, just so that the metal is not the only point in case somebody does something weird. I don't want to rip out of the radio. This is prepped and ready to go back into the car. We're not, of course, to that point yet, so I'm going to set this aside. The next part we're going to need is the steering wheel control interface, the plug, and the plug for the radio. The harness we're going to be using is the 707903. We're going to use the Maestro SW steering wheel control interface that will take over the computer and program. And this is the Kenwood harness. On the Kenwood radios, and the JVC for that matter, they have a vehicle speed sense wire, this little guy right here. And when the radio was first released, it had to be connected. But then they updated the GPS antenna, this was last year, and now it's not necessary for the installation. The GPS antenna is more sensitive, and Apple said it was okay that you don't have to hook it up. However, I don't recommend totally removing it because you may need it for a later installation, or it might not work properly. Either way, it is quite a long wire. I do like to shorten it up to a normal length. In comparison, it's just as long as the reverse wire, which we won't be using in this car either. On the harness, it has the speaker wire outputs that won't be getting used. We'll cap those off, along with the reverse and the VSS. We will need the steering wheel control wire. There's 2 other wires on here we will not be using, which are the cam plus and minus. They're green white and green red. Those can stay over here on the side. There's also a power antenna or amplified antenna output, which is a solid blue wire. That leaves us with a black ground, yellow 12 volts, a blue white for remote turn on, red is ignition, orange white is illumination, and of course the light blue yellow for steering wheel controls. I'm going to take a moment here to cap all these off and put them off on their own umbilical so they're not in the way of the wiring harness we actually need. We put these little tiny butt connectors on the ends to protect the wires. I've also soldered the VSS wire shorter. I like to use exterior Tessa tape to group all these wires together. Once we get to the end, I take a big piece of shrink wrap, put them over the end. It's in a nice bundle, and that will keep all my wires out of the way of the harness that I'll be using that really matters. Because this car has the Bose amplifier and we are not retaining it, we don't need any of the speaker wires on this harness. Let's remove them. That gets us down to the core colors and what we just need to attach to here. Next, we need to go over to the laptop and flash our steering wheel control module. That way we can see where this needs to hook up into. Inside the box, you get the USB programmer, the steering wheel control cable itself that has an 1/8 inch end on it, as well as a blue-yellow. Blue-yellow is what we're going to be using. I like to remove the parts, obviously, that I'm not using. This harness is easy enough to pin them back in. On the side, there's a blue, a black, an LED, and a push button, as well as a bigger clip on the other side that this is going to plug into, and the input for the USB flash. To flash your module, you'll need a couple things: make, model, and year of the car. You also need to download the WebLink updater and create an account. Anyone can do that. Select the green box for flashing Maestro. Flash by vehicle. This is a 2008 Mazda MX5. It's going to give you a picture of the steering wheel. Just double check it against yours. If it matches, click it and move on to the next. Enter in the radio that you're using. The MX5 7XR. Select how you want to configure it. In this case, our only option is as a steering wheel control. Now we get to customize how we want our steering wheel buttons to work. One of the things that's default on this that I don't particularly like is the hold for mute. A lot of people like to hold volume down and have it just go down at a normal pace, so I always shut that off. But you can program these buttons to do anything you want. Track up and down, answer calls, hang up calls. You have press and hold, so each button can be 2 features. If you're satisfied, select continue. It's going to give you an overview of what you just did. If you're good, flash. Once it's done flashing, you can print a wallet card if you did a whole bunch of weird stuff. Otherwise, go to download install guide and it will give you your instructions on how this is to be hooked up. The first page is an overview of the wiring harness. As we scroll down, now it is going to give us the actual wires we're going to be using for our connection and a pin connector. So we can now use this to connect it into the car. And it looks like most of our wires are going to be in the factory harness. The bummer is on this harness, the speaker wires are not the same size as these 3 in the middle here. I'm going to grab a second one of these and pull those pins out and repin them into this harness so that I don't have to cut the factory wiring harness to do this install. And according to my instructions, they're going to go into A10 and A9, which are located in these thin wires here in the center up in the top corner, which looks like they're the opposite corner of the remote turn on and the power antenna. But now I have to delicately remove these 2 donor wires. Alright, so I've removed one, the red one here, which is easier to get out, just to kind of see how this locks into place. And there's a pin located on the top that needs to get pushed down. And then the wire comes right out. I have a box where I keep these extra harnesses. If I need to remove that one for something else, I can. Take my knife and pry these 2 teeth back up. And if I look at this properly, need one here and here. A9 is going to attach to my black-white wire, and A10 is going to attach to my purple-red wire. And that's it, that's all we need. Just like before, I can remove the wires I'm not going to use out of this harness. With this, I just use a razor blade and pop up the tooth. I got to set those with my other piece, and if I need them, I can install them back in. And that finishes up this. I also soldered in all my other connections, basically color for color, yellow to yellow, black to black, that sort of thing. Grabbing my exterior Tessa tape, tape this harness up, and there's a method for it that makes sense to me, and how that is tape from the plug into the center here, from here into here, from here into here, and from here into here, so that they all meet in here. The reason for that, the end is what's going to want to unravel, and the end will be in the center, and we're going to do another layer of tape in the center. So start here, pull tight, wrap it around twice, and work your way into the center. Do not cover up your soldered wires. The reason why we do it like this is now we're gonna take the interior test tape and we're just gonna cover up the shrink wrap end. The reason for that is if we ever need to service this, all we have to do is peel off this one portion of tape and that's it. We can easily get to all our connection points here. It also helps to tell us that that's where our connection points are located. Pull it nice and tight. Tighter you make it, the better it will stay. When wrapping it, try to half the tape, meaning half over the old. It sticks to itself really, really well and will hold longer. At the end, do 2 wraps. There we have it. There's our harness for this car.
For installing our microphone, we're gonna put it right here on the top, right behind the rear mirror. For that, you gotta remove the screw this underneath the sun visor. That is a T27. Then the bracket that locks the roof, those are T40. It's 2 of them. And then finally the A-pillar. It's just 2 clips, pop it to the right side, comes out. We already have our microphone ready. We put 1/8 inch loom across the wire so we don't pinch, just to protect the wire. Grab your pry tool, slowly just bring it down a little bit, put your fingers, and if you see right now it's kind of loose, you put some foam. Trim your zip ties.
We have to get to the factory amplifier. All the research I've done shows it's behind this panel. Which I thought it'd be behind this panel, but I didn't know it would be like directly behind this panel. There's a foam splash guard over the top of it, and we have 4 10mm bolts. This Bose amplifier looks very familiar. It looks just like the Bose amplifier that they use in all the General Motors cars, which could be really good for us. We might be able to find a harness that plugs into it. If anyone ever wanted to see a Bose amp, this is it in all its glory. This is the standard Bose connection, so we will have a harness that's going to work with this. I was hoping we would have enough room for our amplifier to go in here. They have another water barrier right here, leading me to believe that there is going to be liquid that's going to get into this. We're still probably going to have to pull this assembly apart to get to this area here if we go with the amplifier in this area. I'm also thinking that it might be better to go down here up underneath the seat. Now it's time to do a little bit of exploring and figure out what will work best for our application. The amplifier we're going to be using is the XR401.4 4-channel high-res audio amplifier. Inside the box does come with a bass knob, and this is a Kenwood bass knob. This is the same one that works on all their amplifiers. We won't be using it for this installation. Comes with an owner's manual and some screws for the bass knob and the amplifier itself. Aside from the fact that the amplifier is high res, one of the other reasons I like this amplifier is how thin it is. It is 1 3/8 tall. That's it. I mean, it's nothing. On this end, we have 2 30-amp fuses, a 4-gauge power and ground input, remote turn on. Front speaker comes first, then the rear speakers, left then right. The positives are these colored in circles here, so the positives are on the outside, negatives are on the inside, and the amplifier is bridgeable. That's why it comes with the bass knob, so that you can use this to do, let's say, a front and a sub. It has channel A input, channel B input. On the other side of the amplifier, we see that subwoofer input. First up is input selection. You can use all 4 inputs or just channel A input. The reason for that is if you are going to be using it to, let's say, power up that subwoofer and you just have a left and right input, you could use that to power the whole amp to fill in for the subwoofer. If you have something that has a subwoofer level control, or in this case has 4 outputs, we'll be using all 4. We'll be using the AB input. Gain control between 5 and 0.2 volts on both front and rear. The crossover for channel A is low pass, off, or high pass. for channel B is low pass, off, or high pass. Then we have what's called high frequency range or low frequency range for both front and rear. This is where this amplifier gets unique. It is capable of 50 to 200 hertz or 2.5K to 10,000 hertz on both channels. This amplifier can do bi-amp or active crossovers for the tweeter and the mid-range. That's the other reason why we chose that amp. So channel 1 and 2, we can use this to cross over the tweeters. Channel 3 and 4, we can use this to cross over the mid-range. The one thing it does not do is provide a bottom for the mid-range. So just like a passive crossover, it will give you the bottom for the tweeter, the top for the mid-range, and the bottom, meaning how low will this play, it has to be done from another unit. In this case, like the source unit that we'll be putting in, we could set that bottom for the mid-range or the high pass crossover wherever we need it, and this amplifier will do that for us. It's a really cool feature that not a lot of amplifiers have. Let's take this over into the car and figure out where we're going to put it. Looking up underneath the seat, the amplifier has plenty of room. It will clear no issues, which is what I was hoping, and I liked this amplifier for this installation. A couple other nice things that we have when we're running the wire. Underneath the hood on this side, there are some holes that look very promising. I've put my hand up onto the firewall, and where these two little holes are located, there doesn't seem to be anything there. I haven't been able to touch these yet, but this area I have been, because I can grab onto this and move across. I haven't gotten low enough to feel those yet. I'm gonna go next door and grab the GM harness for the amplifier. We'll have to make and repin that according to however Mazda's running their wiring, but let's head over to the bench. To integrate into the Bose amplifier, Metra makes this GM harness here, the 70-2054. It might not be pinned right, but it's the harnesses that we need, meaning the plastics. We take these over to the car, we can figure them out. The other nice thing too is this one, which I think is an older version of the harness. I don't think the newer version has all this wiring. I think it's just a short 6-inch. I could be wrong, but it has plenty of wiring on it, so we can use this to go to our new amplifier. Two harnesses, one fairly large but only has 8 wires in it, 6 of which are full. On that there's a big blue and a big black. Those are the power and ground. We want to make sure we stay away from those, and conveniently enough this harness isn't pinned where those 2 wires are. This one isn't going to plug in, and the reason for that is on the back of the harness there's 2 teeth, and this only has a provision for 1 tooth. We can remove the one that is in our way because it will not affect how the system plugs into the factory amplifier. Let's see if the other one lines up. Plugs in. Have our 2 harnesses, tone generator. In this harness we have the signal. They have a big fat gray wire. We can move those out of the way. We've already tested this pink and purple, which we know aren't what we need. Another one above it. So that is our driver's tweeter. This is the passenger side, and this is the driver's side. The other wire I want to find is the remote turn on, the one that comes from the radio back to here. I just want to use that one since it's already wired up in the harness. Behind the radio, the factory plug, when it plugs in, and I look at the blue-white wire, there's a pink-black wire on the opposite side of it. There's also a pink-black wire back here, and that wire doesn't have anything pinned into it. Looking at the back of the harness, it is the second pin in this harness. So what I'm doing is I'm testing for continuity between the wire behind the radio with this probe, and I'm testing the wire here, this end, with this probe. I have my meter set to continuity, which is this radiating line right here, and when it makes that beeping sound, I know that wire is connected. That means I can repin the harness using one of the wires that I don't need for my remote turn on, and just use the factory remote turn on down to my amplifier along with the speaker wires. Pretty convenient. That means the only thing I have to run up to the radio is a set of RCAs. I'm gonna go over to the bench and pull some wires out of the harness. With this harness, there's these 2 clips on either side. The top one here doesn't have any wiring in it, but we need to remove it. That's where the new remote turn on wire is gonna go. This really doesn't have any good like wire coloring combinations. Thought is to just remove wiring from holes that we don't need. These are the 4 we need. We'll just remove the rest. Those wires out, put one of the locks back into place, and we could start pulling these out of the bundle of wires. I'm not a fan of this, but when we're done, we can twist them all together and make a nice harness as opposed to this. Ugh. The remote turn on that we'll be pinning in is located on the second one here on the bottom. Clip that in, and there we go. On the bigger harness, this piece here comes off similar to these, and you can poke in and get those out, which I've already done. I'm gonna put these in the vise and twist our pairs together so that it just doesn't look like a mess. This is what I've come up with for the harness. I Y-taped it here, brought the tape all the way down here to this, cut it a lot shorter. We didn't need it that long, and I still don't actually need it this long. Put some heat shrink on the end here to protect the tape so it won't unravel. And I'm gonna set this aside for right now because I need to hop into the car now and build the amp rack in order to hold it up underneath the seat. This is the area here that we want to mount the amplifier. The speaker wire is gonna come up and come around and come through this factory hole here. I'm gonna use these two bolts for mounting for this. I need to make a piece that kind of goes around here, up, and then into this area. I just need to get a tape measure and some paper. "18 inches by 14. When positioning the amplifier, I want to make sure I can get to my controls here on the end. That'll be the most important. All right, I'm going to start with 18 by 14. Here is our 18 by 14 piece. Amplifier is going to sit somewhere in this area here. Bring this in, more than that. Don't need anything around the back side of the amplifier, so we can keep that narrow. And move this here. This gives us something like this, this. And I'll just copy this shape over to this size. This probably will get a little bit shorter too. I think it's just a tad bit too long. But I'm gonna wait until I get this cut out first. Let's head over to the table saw. So after a little saw action, this is the basic style shape that we've come up with. We do have to heat the area up here and here to put some bends in it that are on the floor. Still might want to remove some of this, but let's take it into the car and just see how it looks. I'll have to heat it up through here and push it down into place. I want to round these edges too. Before I heat it up, I want to round over the edges. To heat this up, we're going to use our torch. Start from the back side, twist it around like this. Once you get it nice and flexible, set it in the car. So just line it up in place and push the panel down into place. Just kind of manhandle it into where you want it to be. I like to just keep touching it but not holding it because it is really hot until you get it where you want it. You can bend these in different directions. You have a lot of freedom with the movement while it's hot like this. You just keep touching it until you feel like it's hard. So you're gonna be here for a minute or two. If you have like a wet sponge or something like that, you can always use that to make it cool down faster. While I'm here looking in this corner, I also want to take some of this off and give it more of an arc. This side is fine. If that cooled off, this will be the final look. As much as I would like to trim a little bit off here, I don't think I'm going to have to. But I do need to set the seat back in and just make sure, do one final test before we wire it up. While you have the seat in right now, also mark where your screw holes are. There's tons of room underneath here, which of course you can't see that well, but yeah, it looks great. The seat back out, I'll meet you over on the bench. We'll start wiring this thing up. First step, screwing the amplifier down into place. We have way more room up front here than I thought we had, so I'm pretty happy about that. I can move this amp up, check my gapping here, make sure everything looks good. sand down the pointy screw things on the back side of the amplifier. One thing I need to do that I just thought about before we start wiring this stuff up is find out which one of these wires, positive, negative, right, left, and all that. To do that, I have my PT9A Plus polarity checkers, and this gives me the ability to create a pulse that will click and start making that pop. Now I have a second one that I can walk over to the car and check to see what speaker it is and if I got positive or negative. That's the tweeter, and of course I got it wrong, but at least starts me in the right direction that I know which one is what. Moving on to my next pair. This is one on the passenger side, and it's the tweeter. Ooh. I got it right that time. When doing this testing is not a process of elimination. We have to test every pair. All our speaker wires popped and we know what is going where. We can get back over to the bench and get this harness wired up to the amplifier. Speaker wires are gonna attach right here, and then we'll cut them to length. Using my wire ruler to space out properly. Drill my holes in there. Now I need to just kind of figure out where the wires are going to route. I like to keep them close in tight to the amplifier. We'll be putting wire ferrules on the ends of the wire. Wire ferrules are sleeves that protect the wires so that when you torque it down it doesn't get all tore up. Add a piece of blue heat shrink so we know this is the remote turn on. With that done, I'm going to move from left to right across, screwing in all of my speaker wires, putting ferrules on the ends, as well as some red and black heat shrink so I know which one is positive and negative. We're going to use channel A for the tweeters and channel B for the mid bass. With the last zip tie in place, our speaker wires and remote turn on are in. Moving on to our power section, I've already flex loomed the ground and power. We do the whole wire. Ground towards the speaker wires, positive is on the outside. These screws use a bigger Allen key than the speakers. These wires also have ferrules on them. Make sure when screwing down, you tighten these things up. Do not leave them loose. When you leave them loose, they create heat because they're moving. You can cause a fire. You can cause severe damage to the amplifier. Power's next. Both of these wires are going to come out here and turn up because they're going to be coming up the passenger side of the car. These wires are going to be coming up the center console into the dash area. Adding some zip ties to hold these down just like this. Grabbing the wire ruler. 3 quick holes, line this up. I'll finish these up and get some zip ties in. The last step is adding in 2 6-foot RCAs. One of the big things about RCAs that people are like, oh, like this has a little flag right here. It says connect to source. And then they say they're directional. And the reason why this is on here is they have a drain wire, meaning there's a third wire that's wrapped into each one of these that is connected on this end, but not on that end. And the reason it's for that is for noise. So it's not like it's special copper or anything like that. It's just an additional noise filter that's put in through the RCAs when it's twisted together. If you wire them in backwards, it's not going to do anything. All it's going to do is move the noise the opposite direction. The signal will still play, and if your car has no noise, it really doesn't matter. Some heat shrink to 2 of the RCAs for left and right. Obviously you have red and clear for left and right. The reason why we did this though is to show that this is our tweeter channel, and then the non-shrink wrapped will be B, which is our mid-bass channel. On this amplifier, we could have just plugged into A and flicked the switch and been fine, which in reality is really all we need to do because we don't have front to rear fader. It's just pure front. The reason why we're not doing that though is because the radio also has a feature called network mode. So even though this amplifier will do bi-amping, we're not going to use it for that. We're going to use the radio to do that. 2 of the channels on the radio can be tweeter, 2 of the channels on the radio can be mid-range. It has all the corresponding crossovers, and when we get to that point, we'll show you how that works. In the meantime, now that we have these plugged in, I'm going to dress these 2 wires up here, get them zip tied into place. With the RCA in place, the last thing to do before we get it into the car is put our little metal trim piece back in place that we took off to get to the screws. That way we don't forget to do it in the end. Check the amplifiers, dip switches, and gains just to make sure that everything is off that needs to be off. Make sure my gains are all the way down. Typically amplifier manufacturers for some reason send the amps with the gains up. Kind of annoying, but whatever. Our input switch is correct. With all that done, let's get this into the car, get these wires ran. The wires are ran. Amplifier wires came in through the back. They're in place. Our signal wire went up this way. The RCAs are into the dash. Power wire came along here and up in. The ground is located right there, along with the power wire. In the firewall, we ended up using the piece of tape here that was just blocking the hole like this. Punched that out, put a grommet in. Power wire came right through, runs along the factory wiring harness and into the main battery here. It has this giant cover over it. So we did our standard mount where we put the screw here with the fuse holder. It is a pain in the butt to get to this, but Fernando was more than willing to take it off to show you guys. And our fuse holder actually fit underneath it. Bolts into here, we added in this bolt to hold our mount so they can take this off. This whole thing will lift out of place and they can get to their battery and service it. With that all in place, the last thing we have is the radio sitting over here that needs to go into the dash. But before we do that, we're going to get all the running boards, the seat put back into place, and then we'll meet you in the dash. Which is weird because it's video, so it's like it's literally the next scene. You guys will have yeah, you understand. When you're doing Kenwood's network mode, there's two ways you can do it. You can use the power out of the radio or the RCAs. On page 30 of the instruction manuals, it kind of breaks it down. We'll be using the RCAs, so the top two RCAs are tweeters, then mid-range, then subwoofer. When using deck power, the white and gray set are going to be for your mid-range, and the green and purple are going to go to your tweeters. This is opposite from what the other manufacturers do. Also, it talks down here in the special notes, it says, for three-way speaker system, see page 87. They're not referring to this, they're referring to the actual guide that you have to download from online. And that'll show you the two buttons that you have to hold. When plugging a radio in, start with your longest wires first. The RCAs we put the shrink wrap on are tweeters. Those will be on top. This radio has dual USB. One is in the glove box and one is down low in the dash here. When installing a Kenwood or JVC or any radio for that matter, there's a lot of aux style inputs on the back of the radio. Make sure you pay attention to where your Bluetooth mic is going to go. This is always the worst part. No matter how well you plan, no matter how much effort you put into the harness, there's always way too much stuff going on when adding an aftermarket radio. Set the clock, set up the color, turn off the demo. Now before we start jamming on it, we have to grab the instruction manual. Gone to the website, the manuals under support, page 87. Put the radio in standby. Once in standby, hold the two outside buttons, so volume down and cam, press and hold. It'll pop up this that says switch crossover network mode. Select three-way, select yes. Turn back on your radio, hit menu, audio, go to your crossovers and speaker selection. And now what you'll see is something very similar, but there's speakers here and then speakers down here. And we have our high pass crossover, our band pass crossover, and our low pass crossover. For these tweeters, pick 25K, 24 dB, go to our band pass. Our low pass filter is going to be that same at 24, and our high pass, we're going to keep it low for right now just to hear what it sounds like because we don't have a subwoofer. So we'll start at 50 and see what happens. The crossover set, we can now test our system's volume, our polarity, and all those other fun things. We like to start with some pink noise just to make sure all the speakers are playing, and then we'll move on to our polarity pop track. Mid bass is good. Tweeter's good. Mid bass good. Our tweeter's good. One last test we want to do is balance left and right. Go back into our menu, hit audio, balance and fader. And as you see, these two are grayed out. Go to the driver's side. When you're on the driver's side, it's simple enough to just listen to the passenger side and see there's no sound. That's perfect. One of the cool features that Kenwood does offer in the radios is a center button. You can get onto some of our more basic, our steering wheel controls, CarPlay, make sure the microphone's doing what it needs to do. You know, just go through all the minutia stuff. Once that's done, we'll sit in the car and we'll take a listen to it. one for sure was definitely like, I don't know how the ending is gonna be. I mean, we like to write stories where we know the ending. And we were taking out a Bose system. We had a bigger driver, we had more drivers.
Sometimes you don't feel it, you know, like you do something and it's like,
I actually tried to talk this customer out of doing this, just to give you an idea. And he's like, no, I want a high-res system. So we're like, all right, well, I've tried my best. And man, I'm pleasantly surprised. This sounds really good.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason why this was pulled off successfully was because of those XR components. Having that big 7-inch, oh my gosh, just the deepness that those have.
That mid-bass is insane.
This is just killing it. That big tweeter, 1 3/16 of an inch, lots of sound coming out of it. It was capable of being crossed over nice and low, get a lot of sound out of them, blend them in with that mid-bass, let that mid-bass play down low. Yeah, this is a really nice system. I'm sure he's gonna be happy playing all his DSD files and FLAC files, cruising around. He's got a really expensive player. This has an aux jack in it as well as wireless CarPlay and wired CarPlay. It's lots of fun.
Yeah.
Well, this was just a nice, I'd say simple, but man, this wasn't simple. There was a lot of work that went into this to get it to where it's at.
This is actually a nice front stage upgrade system.
The only thing missing is a subwoofer, but this car just doesn't have room for it. The gentleman that drives this is a tall guy. His brother, he's also a tall guy. Go figure, family, they're both tall. It's just a fun little car, and it'll have a nice little system in it that sounds really good.
They sound really, really good.
And with that, guys, we're gonna end it here. Thank you so much for watching. Fernando, if you please.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.